The light went down fast on the flats, leaving the wagons drawn up in a shallow curve beside a dry wash. Canvas bellied in the wind, mules tugged at nosebags and stamped at flies. The man who called himself Johnson moved from fire to fire with a cup of coffee in one hand and a calm word for every teamster. He'd been hired back at the settlement when he traced the route with a finger on a grease-stained map and named waterholes without looking, the way only a man who's seen them can. He took pay up front, extra for the risk, and a key to the strong box that rode under the seat of the lead wagon. The box held pooled money, a pouch of dust sealed with wax, 2 watches wrapped in cloth. He said the trail would treat them fair if they kept pace and kept quiet. The way he said it made even the uneasy men nod. The party was small, 5 wagons, 9 men, 2 women, and a boy who hadn't grown into his boots yet. A preacher traveled with them, thin and steady, the kind of man who mends a harness because it needs doing and says a prayer only after the leather lies right. The first days went clean. Johnson found grass in bends of arroyos and water where you'd swear the country had none. He set a schedule that felt like certainty. When wind came mean, he kept them tucked in the lee of low bluffs. When heat built, he had them move at first light and again at dusk. It felt like a working partnership with the land instead of a fight. Little things began to shave that comfort. A mule rope came up empty at morning feed, no break in the fibers, just a knot that had been opened by fingers. A sack of flour split along a seam and left a chalky trail for 100 yards. One evening, the strong box sounded lighter when Johnson lifted it. He rapped the lid and smiled, as if the weight were a superstition they'd do better without. When a teamster asked to count, Johnson said they'd count in the next settlement with daylight and witnesses, not in camp where nerves ran short and light ran shorter. He changed watches, saying efficiency demanded it. He sent 2 young men to scout a shortcut along the rim at midday and told them to wave their hats once they could see the next basin. No hats waved. The party camped late, away from the beaten road. Arguments flared over small slights, tobacco gone, coffee measured stingy. Johnson cut them off the way a smith taps a hot bar and changes the bend. The preacher spoke 5 words about patience and closed his Bible. Night came with a bite. The shot woke the camp from a dead sleep. Lanterns jittered, throwing mean shadows on canvas. The preacher lay face down by the fire with dark spreading through his shirt. The boy made a sound like a hiccup, and then nothing. Johnson moved fast and level, saying the report had come from the ridge and that he'd sweep it. He sent the 2 men who had argued hardest, each with a rope and a lantern. He walked the perimeter himself and came back with soot on his cuffs and a crease between his eyes that he smoothed away with his thumb. He told the women to pack what they could for a dawn move and set the boy on the lead bench with a blanket around his shoulders. Morning brought no scouts and no tracks but wind. Johnson said the rim path was bad ground and that anyone on it at night could have gone over. He pointed to heat shimmers already starting on the plain and said the only smart move was forward to water. He promised a pool under cottonwoods and set a pace that made talking a luxury. When they reached a mud-choked pothole, he said there was another pool just ahead. He took the boy to check it and came back with sap on his sleeves, saying they'd found it and that the taste was metallic, which meant it would carry them. He did not invite anyone else to look. Another man asked to open the box at dusk. Johnson popped the lid just enough to flash coins and closed it with a laugh that didn't care if you found it funny. He said the trail was no place for ceremony. They'd swear it right in town. He assigned watches that kept him from standing alone with any suspicious pair. Somewhere in the night, a single rifle cracked from beyond the wash. Johnson said it was heat-breaking rock and returned to the fire with a poker as if to prove how ordinary the world remained. By gray light, a bedroll lay empty and a rifle leaned against a wheel, wiped clean out of habit or guilt. Tracks near the edge of camp looked confused. Hasty steps, a drag, hoof marks crossing and recrossing. Johnson called for motion. He said weather was turning and told the boy to sit tight and keep an eye on the team with the crooked hame. People moved because forward is what a line of wagons does when backward would mean admitting the wrongness you've kept swallowing. The land went hollow. Heat bent the horizon. Vultures spun on tight circles. The blowflies that ride bad luck lifted and settled along the rim where the missing scouts had vanished. Johnson pressed them through, praising men who kept their mouths shut and snapping at small waist as if every spilled coffee bean were a life. At the next camp, he made coffee himself, poured a cup, and then kicked dirt over the fire, saying Light wrote them on the country. He took first watch and told the others to sleep hard. The boy, still awake, brought him a cup and found no one at the place Johnson should have been. The attack felt like a storm that starts without rain. 2 shots, answering shots, one man yelling about figures near the wash, then a tangle of feet and dust and iron clanging where a Dutch oven went over. When the air settled, Johnson was gone, and so were the 2 who had pushed hardest to count the money. The strong box sat open on the wagon bench. The velvet had been slashed to check for a false bottom. The cut went clean through. Tracks of 3 horses ran south across hardpan. A mile out, a burn scar showed where papers and cloth had been fed to a small fire, emptying what didn't spend as easily as coin. Past that, the country turned to rock, and sign vanished into stone the color of old bones. The remaining men followed until the heat made their lips crack, and the women's faces said enough. They limped back to camp and bound a broken leg with splints carved from a dismantled yoke. They slept in shifts and woke from bad dreams to a worse morning. They made a settlement after 2 hard days, the kind with cottonwoods and a hand-dug well and a store where the scale sits at the edge of the counter like a judge. They told the story to a sheriff who had lines at his eyes and a pair of cuffs that jingled as he listened. A posse rode and came back with dust and no answers. Word went out on Johnson by the names he'd given and the names people guessed. A horse trader swore a man with soft hands had traded a bay for a dun and overpaid with coins too clean for trail work. A clerk said a tall stranger bought a new hat, needles, and a paper of tacks and signed the register with a left-handed scrawl. A herder said he saw 3 riders split at a dry fork, one taking the low ground toward a crossing that leads to country where even weather gets lost. The party broke like a rope rubbed thin. One wagon turned back with the preacher's Bible and the boy asleep against the tailboard. 2 men hired on with a freight outfit bound for the mines, as if a new trail could burn the old one out of their heads. The women built a stone heap near the wash and set thin boards for markers. The injured man healed with a limp that named him before he said his own. The sheriff kept a page for Johnson in the book he opened when the room went quiet, and he added to it when travelers offered pieces that might fit. This saloon, that crossing, a man who could talk you into trusting him and talk himself out of the blame for what followed. The story hardened into a warning. Don't keep the pool in one box. Don't let any man carry it alone. Count at noon and again at last light, with everyone's hands empty and everyone's eyes on the same weight. Don't split your best pair to scout a path the dust hasn't earned. Anyone who won't answer a straight question with a straight tale shouldn't set your pace. People said those things because they wished the saying would unmake what the country had already taken. As for Johnson, he became a rumor that never went cold. A ranger found a slot canyon with a shirt cuff torn from velvet, a watch that wouldn't wind, and a single coin pressed into a seam of dried mud, left like a dare. A stage driver swore a tall man rode guard one season and quit with a smile after a payroll run. A gambler said he'd watched a stranger win and lose without blinking, as if the stake were just a way to pass the time between departures. None of it closed the book. The desert doesn't write endings. It wears them down. Years later, the boy grew into a man who checked locks twice and insisted on 2 keys for anything that mattered. When he told the story, he didn't start with the strongbox or the shots. He started with the first evening, the wind pushing dust low along the ground, the way a hired guide's confidence makes a camp breathe easier, and the moment when you learn that ease is a thing you pay for with the attention you didn't give while you had it. He would look toward the wash as he spoke, as if the country might offer up the rest. It never did. The markers at the stone heap grayed and leaned. The trail filled with other wheels. But on certain nights, when heat holds and the breeze runs through the grass like a whisper, people say they hear 3 quick shots and a horse moving south at a pace that means not coming back. Thank you for listening to Deserted Trails. Subscribe for more forgotten stories from the old frontier.